Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing?
Good morning. That's a great day for hacking, isn't it?
It's definitely a morning, that's for sure. Hang on a second. Coffee, much better.
You have to get used to get up early, man.
No, I'm not an early starter. No, I deny your reality and substitute my own.
All right. Yes. So thanks you for joining in. I have to tell you some numbers. So I think we passed already the half-time mark, and yeah, right now we have 26 hours or almost 27 hours left. So whenever you decide to join, it's still the right time. So we planned this hackathon that everyone is able to work at least 24 hours on their project. So no matter when is your holiday or whatever, if you have family, you have plenty of time to work a full day on your project. So there's still time left. If you join now, no problem at all.
Should I give some numbers on what we've seen so far?
All right, yeah.
So we've had 2,247 users register so far.
That's double from the last year.
Last year we had 960, so that's great. We got more than last year, so that's always a good start. We have 606 teams registered. There was 824 invitations sent out, and 622 of those were accepted. So there's what did we say about those numbers? About what, three to four people per team. So with them, they're probably maxing out. Some people are maxing out their teams, and about what, 3/4 of invitations are accepted. So that's a good number as well.
Yeah, and today is the last day for us, so please also prepare your video. That's a quite important part. Not only hack your code, but also prepare a nice presentation in form of a video.
What we might do later, if we have time in the submission video, is to go through some quick uses of FFmpeg to show you how to maybe overlay audio on top of video or something like that, just to help you guys put some video together, or make some suggestions as to tools you can use.
I'd also like to show you some of the projects I've already seen on social media. So there are some updates, and just to give you an idea what people are currently working on. So for example, I've seen here a cool futuristic UI with some glow font. That's pretty cool. I'm pretty interested what's coming after this app is initializing.
Make your robot.
Yeah. We had a great idea for our eco theme, and this is a local buffet, and it locates refrigerators around the city where individuals and restaurants can place food for others to take, so we don't waste our food. That's an amazing idea, and I really wanted to see that in other cities as well.
Just say, yeah, that sounds really good.
I've seen plenty of screenshots already for games using Flame, and especially retro games like this one here. And not only will we see a lot of games, but I think such games are perfect for distributing them in Flutter for web. So I'm happy to play them as soon as possible.
I remember playing this type of game when I was a kid.
You're too old, man. All right. We have some guests today, and I'd like to introduce all of them. So welcome Maxime, Pawan, and Devon to the stream. Welcome. Guys.
Hi.
Do we have,
some
handles?
Yeah. Maxime, do you like to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, sure. Like, my name is Maxim. I'm based down here in Melbourne, in Australia. So I've been doing Flutter for a couple of years now. I'm a co-organizer of our local GDG, and more recently the Flutter Melbourne group. And even more recently, I've become a GDE. So yeah, I'm trying to do a lot of work here in the Flutter community down here in sunny Melbourne.
Where the water goes the other way.
Yes, definitely. Down the antipodes, as you would say, Simon.
Yes. I was actually speaking to your other organizer, Mike. Is it Mike Hughes?
Mark, yeah, he's our lead
sorry.
organizer at Flutter Melbourne. Yep.
Yeah.
All right, next in the group is Pawan.
Hi everyone. So I think people know me from my channel Tech Viral, so that should be the first thing I would talk about. So I'm Pawan. I'm from India, and I'm doing Flutter stuff for some time now. Maybe it's around like 3 years now, and I'm also
Mr. Tech Viral himself.
yeah.
You're never gonna get rid of that.
And what else? I am a GD for Flutter Firebase. And apart from that, I just recently did Flutter Stream Day on Tech Viral. And I think many of you guys have watched it. I hope so. And let's see what else we will do in the future.
And our next participant here is Devin.
Hi everyone. I've been my name is Devin, and I am a Flutter developer since probably alpha. I mainly do technical writing, and I've done a lot of stuff back from maybe 2018, and that's been going pretty well. So I've written a lot of deep dive type articles and a lot of content writing in general. I was also the winner of Hack 19 last year, and yeah, thank you. Simon gave me a trophy like around 4 to 4
Show us
months
the
later.
trophy.
Oh yeah. So I won Hack 19 last year, and our clarification, my team won Hack 19 last year. So we also had last year was much shorter, obviously, but this time they look to have a lot more momentum going in terms of people and like a lot more participation from what I can see. And another stuff, I'm a senior developer at a company called Baitfinder based in Texas, and I do more or less everything else. I just do crazy experiments in Flutter, like animations mostly.
All right. Since we have so many, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I really want to hear about what's been happening with Flutter India. I've been seeing all the tweets, and I know I haven't had any involvement because I've been organizing Hack 20. I'm really curious.
Pawan, do you want to tell something about that?
Yeah, I mean, India is a huge country in terms of people. So there are like a lot of communities, and everyone is trying to, give something back to people. So we have many groups already, and they came together like different GDG groups from all different states in the country, and they organized Flutter India, which was a meetup where I guess there were 3 to 4 guest speakers, and it happened yesterday. So how we planned things were like, we knew that Flutter Day is happening on 25th, and then we planned Flutter Stream Day on 26th, and then 27th was Flutter India Day. And then we knew that, okay, now Hack 20 is about to begin. So overall, if you'll see, like it was kind of like a big week for us, especially for Indian crowd. And you guys know, like, YouTube is full of Indian people all around. So we have to be ready for like so much stuff. So yeah, that's what happened in India.
That's amazing how the community there came together to organize such a great event. And it was really, really huge. I mean, there were like hundreds and hundreds of people on the live stream. Very great.
I was just actually thinking, like last year at Hack 19, I think the biggest one participating location was Globan, India. I think it was. It was.
Yeah. I was over there.
You were there. So was it about 250 people, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, it was pretty. I think we had 2 centers in like our city itself because they couldn't accommodate those many people. Yeah, I think there was like Red Hat or something. There was one in another location, and then there was Globant. So Globant was pretty big. So they had a lot of people.
So I think the numbers, if I remember right, it was about average of about 25 people per location. There's 70 locations. So there's a huge gap between 25 and like 250 there. So
that's why I actually consider like beating that location was slightly harder than beating the international crowd, because that was actually tough because there were some great ideas over there as well. So
That's what I was thinking. I'm thinking if you 1 out of 250 people, that's not bad going.
Yeah.
You will probably see the same number
Sure.
this year as well. Hopefully, better. In fact, better numbers.
So all of you are
We have a lot
currently
of community members, like especially in all the locations, like what he was describing. The communities here are huge. I mean, even the GDGs have like 5,000-6,000 members in a single city. So it's pretty insane.
It's not. I mean, to be honest, I mean, all across the world, when we did Hack 19, it was just really surprising suddenly how there's so many people in all these different locations. I'm like, I just couldn't keep track of that. And definitely, I mean, I'm curious if we might have to do we'll probably send out a Google form at the end of the event just to get some feedback from everyone about what they thought about the event, how it was done, but also maybe give some information if they want to give it like location, so we can get these statistics that we need to sort of progress forward to next year and so on.
we have some question here, and I like all of you answer that. So how did you get your job as Flutter developer? Starting with Maxime.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, yeah, I actually, like, I've been working as a Android freelancer basically almost 10 years now, but I actually got my first gig doing a commercial Flutter project last year. Around this time last year I started. So I guess the thing I've seen mostly, at least in our local area here, is that Flutter seems to be an attractive thing for startups or companies that are kind of coming out of the startup phase. So that seems to be kind of like the core market, as it were, for Flutter here, and then for Flutter development as well, and Flutter development jobs. So at least here in Australia, I think that's been kind of like the focus for Flutter development till now, is like smaller companies and startups seem to be really diving into the using Flutter.
Absolutely, but nevertheless, we have a panel later today where we talk about Flutter at scale from big companies, and they're also using Flutter. So tune into that as well.
Yeah, I'm really keen to see that myself.
Devin, what about you?
I think like if you came from if you started a bit early, then most whatever content you created or whatever things you published or whatever. So mainly people, especially like he said, companies who were just beginning, who were trying to get like more work done in a short amount of time, they started reaching out because they actually saw a potential where you could do a lot of stuff that you simply could not do, let's say in 6 months, that you could publish your whole system by now. So when, like, for me, it was more because of like mainly my blogs and everything else. People just started asking for mainly for freelance and everything. But now, quite honestly, right now I can see where people are taking Flutter seriously, and they're actually looking towards developing long-term solutions. So I think now you can even probably find a proper job, not just created out of need, but now they're switching like genuinely because they like the framework.
Pavan, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have seen good number of companies, hiring for Flutter. Maybe it can be different in terms of like different locations. But when I was in my previous company, then we also hired so many Flutter people, and I can tell you that entire company is now running on Flutter in terms of mobile apps. So there are around 4 mobile apps, and all of them are a couple of them were already written in Android, and then we decided to convert it to Flutter. And there was one more which was in Xamarin, and then we also converted it into Flutter, and one was actually in Flutter. So we hired so many people, and at the same time, like I have a huge network on Twitter, LinkedIn, so I see a lot of opportunities everywhere. And I think maybe COVID-19 is something which actually stopped a little bit that kind of transition which was happening. I used to see that the number is increasing every day in terms of jobs, and I think if you'll search for service-based companies, then you will find more numbers for obvious reasons, right? I mean, for a startup, it's very easy to pick any new technology, but if you look into those kind of companies who are already established, or it's kind of a business decision, right? I mean, it's not just tech decision. They have to think a lot from the business side of point of view. So I think it's going good. And to be honest, my personal belief is that, let's say, even if there are only 10 jobs in the country, then also why you cannot get, you can be one of those 10% as well. So it's about learning, and if you learn, I think there is no waste of knowledge. So these are like, all the platforms are getting similar and similar. Even we talk about Android or iOS, they are also coming towards for declarative UI pattern. And I think if someone has already done Flutter, he will be very easily able to pick Jetpack Compose or Swift UI in the future as well. So yeah, I mean, it's going good, and I think it will improve in the future, as Devin said, or we already know, like, everyone is seeing kind of a lot of people coming towards, even in the groups. Like, I have a Facebook group, Let's Flutter with Dart, and there are other groups as well. We see a lot of job posting there as well, like, but yes, it is very much possible that you won't get the kind of a job which you might be looking for. Maybe there can be few things which are not as expected as you want. But yeah, I think the numbers are increasing pretty well.
I think there is something to be said about like us creating our own jobs, and what I mean by that is just by bringing the platform forward, right? So bringing Flutter into these places, right? Explaining it to people, make sure they're aware of it. That's what open up new job opportunities for everyone. I mean, a good example of this is a few of you were saying was just like we're seeing it coming down from these big companies, which is great. They're seeing that the value there's a value proposition in what Flutter brings, and we got obviously the sort of freelance and just starting an app, and they can just jump straight into it. It's a fresh technology, and we're seeing it kind of somewhere in the middle, which is kind of like agencies and anyone else that has to quick turnaround on applications. They see in there's a potential there for Flutter, and they can do dual platform, which is normally the space for React and React Native. So we're seeing it sort of growing all these different locations, and it seems to be sort of all coming together. But I do think there is definitely value proposition in terms of doing talks at other conferences. So not completely unrelated to sort of mobile. We don't want the Joy-Cons are fine, right? But the problem here is that where is the iOS conference that is showing off Flutter? Just to bring these other areas where Flutter comes in. Then we've got Windows, we've got desktop, we've got Mac, you've got web. So there's so many more places where talks can be done about using Flutter for that platform or for that technology. And I think that's very powerful in terms of bringing it to the forefront of people in these companies, like the CTOs, that need to then look at the technology, see the value in it, and then they can then propose to use it in their next or future projects, right?
What you can do right now to really find a Flutter job is change your job title in LinkedIn to something Flutter developer, and suddenly you will see messages popping up in your inbox. It happens to many people.
I would like to add this thing, like, if you really want to get a job, I mean, your work speaks more than what you can, like, reach to people and ask for a job. So if you are someone who is actually looking for a job, then start doing some work around it. Like, just create a portfolio which can speak itself. Like, people will reach to you. And I have seen like many people who started learning from various sources and started doing some work on GitHub, or maybe going back to communities and doing some things for them. And did this thing actually helped a lot. Like, I have seen people getting jobs, and all of us, I think, whoever are working in Flutter related stuff, we all got this opportunity because of this only. So yeah, I mean, if you will work towards it, then definitely you'll get a job.
If you've been doing freelance, there's definitely something to be said about having a portfolio, right? So having a website up with, even if the apps aren't on the Play Store anymore or anything like that, just make sure you find some screenshots or run the app yourself and try and put something together to show your work. All right. Obviously, that's if it's closed source. If it's open source, brilliant. Put it up on GitHub, link to those things, show people your work.
And I think coming out of the pandemic, I think it'll actually become even easier to find a job, because a lot of companies are going to try to transition to a smaller team, and maybe even they have an opportunity to consolidate their code base for the first time.
Yeah, especially what we're actually also seeing right now is Dart being used on server side, right? So if you're going to be using Dart on your server side and Dart on your client, suddenly you can do that sort of transition where you're using like the same models for your front end and back end. You're using some either HTTP JSON or RPC or something like that, where you're really taking advantage of that sort of singular sort of code base for your project.
Since we have such an amazing group
ahead,
here, I would like to ask some questions in the group. And so, for example, this one here, how can I develop a UI like this in Flutter? Has someone an idea how to do this?
I'm gonna tell you how to cheat. And this has been around since version 1 of Android, and it's called a 9 patch.
9 patch.
Yeah. So actually it's supported by Flutter. So Flutter has a thing called a 9 slice, I think it's called. It allows you to.
Really?
Sorry?
I didn't know that.
Yes.
No, I believe that. I've been using
see, now you're learning something new. This is great. So when you build an image widget, you can actually specify the center rectangle, and it will automatically make all 9 of the rectangles that make the stretch area for you. So basically, you would split each one of these panels up into a separate image, specify the X, Y, and the width and height of the center area, the bit you don't want to stretch, and then it will keep the corners fixed and stretch the areas in the middle for you. So as you type content out, it will just make the windows larger for you. This is how 9 patches work. You can go look up 9 patches and you'll get the information. I will put a link in the chat with details on the API. Anyone else?
And we have another layout question. How to fix an overflow issue when you have a dynamic width and height? So who wants to answer that?
I think I can answer as well.
It's a very generic question. I mean, it can happen for a lot of.
I saw like a tweet recently where someone just I think it's Simon only, right? He created that wrap content widget, and
it was me.
It was you. So you already know the answer to this particular question, I guess. So yeah, so Pascal, what he did, I'll try to explain, which he could explain better. But somebody asked that there is a wrap content and match parent thing in Android, or how we can get similar stuff in Flutter. So he actually created the widget, which is something. What did you name it?
I think it was called Android Layout or something like that.
Yeah. So Android Layout.
Find it.
He just used that width and height, and he gave some options that if you can just use this enum, and you can just say wrap parent or wrap content or match parent. So yeah, I think it's.
So here it is. So basically, the problem here is those 2 things are overlapping, and it's not expanding in the width. And I created this layout. It's called Android Layout, and what you have here is a wrap content. And if you change this to a match parent, it should can't type. It should magically fix the issue. And yes, it did. And what you really have to learn about that, the implementation is rather simple. What you really want to use is a so-called constraint box. And you can define box constraints. And what people don't know is wrap content is basically, it can be 0.0 width. But if you want it to be match parent, you have to use double.infinity, saying it can be as large as possible. And it will look up the parent layout and see how big it can actually be. Yeah, that's something you have to know. And once you get it, it's rather easy.
There can be some issues when using double.infinity, and we'll say that now. So just be aware that it's a nice solution. Yeah. There is another one that you'll see on web quite often when you're doing Flutter with the same sort of problem with overflow, right? And that is, if you make the website smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, you eventually get down to 0, right? So you actually want to put a minimum width for your layout, right? So it doesn't overflow, right? So the normal sort of number is about 320, 360, which is your smallest sort of foam width and dip. So I've got a widget called Horizontal Overflow. I'll chuck it up on my gists. Basically, what it does is it tells the child to measure to a to a width that is either greater than or minimum of this, right, based on the constraints being passed down, and then lets it overflow, and then it aligns the widget to whatever alignment factor you give it. So basically, you can imagine you get smaller, 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 and when it gets smaller than 360, it aligns the content to the center and lets it overflow on the right and left without the overflow errors. Or you can line it to the top left. So this is what we use on the Hack 20 website. So if you make that smaller in the width or height, you'll notice that it never overflows, right? So it doesn't overflow in the width, and then when you make it smaller on the height, when it gets less than a certain amount, it starts to scroll, which is again something you want on web pages. So you want to set minimum height, and then the content scroll after that. So
another thing why overflow happens is because you have a row or a column, and you did not put an expanded inside.
Oh, yeah.
So always make sure if you're using a column or a row, make at least one of those widgets expanded.
And another interesting point there is if you ever make a change to a row column, suddenly get a layout error, wrap the widget that you changed with an expanded probably solves it.
Yeah.
There's actually a great phrase, and it just escapes me, which I'm going to go grab the article. It's a layout article that was done. Here we are. I found it. I'll put it in the comments. 1 second.
By the way, you can also use wrap if you want to move to the next line. If someone is like, trying to fix that, just use wrap. Or if you are using text normally in most of your places, then you can also try this package, which is auto size text. This works pretty great, and I have used it. And like even when I was making Velocity X, that is the default text widget which I was using. And fitted box, yeah, obviously, but yeah, don't use fitted box everywhere, because you don't know what it can cause.
There is, so fitted box will only ever work if the inside widget has a fixed width and height, right? So you know how to align it. There is a trick which you can wrap your widget with an intrinsic width and height inside of your fitted box, and it'll be its intrinsic dimensions, which is its natural unconstrained dimensions.
But it's pretty bad performance-wise.
Yes, performance-wise, it's not going to be good, I guess.
So I pasted a link to the article. The phrase is constraints go down, sizes go up, and positions are set by parents. These are the 3 layout rules, the primary rules of the way the layout system works on Flutter. And the article posted has huge numbers of examples of showing you, and explains each example and tells you what it's actually doing, the reason why it's acting like it's acting, even when there's errors. It shows you the problems with there's errors and why that error occurs. So this really is the go-to article about how these layout problems exist and how to resolve them. This article has also been transposed onto flutter.dev. There's a page on flutter.dev which also contains this information now as well.
So next, I want to talk with Devin last year as the winner of the hackathon. So how did you came up with the idea for the team, and what did you accomplish last year?
So last year I saw that the competitions, first of all, it was just 5 hours. So compared to 48 or 24, it's far smaller, and you only get a limited amount of time to do something. But I guess like it was in a very nice sequence. For example, we had Flutter Create, which was you had to do something in 5 kilobytes of code. So now you have Hack 19, which was something like you have to do something in 5 hours of code. So it was pretty nice how that worked out. So when our team was more or less spontaneous, we hadn't actually met a long time before, but we knew each other through like social media, mainly Twitter. So we were just posting like our own things. And so the themes are actually much more direct than they are this year. So for example, there was nothing compared to Cyberpunk Future or something like that. So the themes were just something like Job Finder. So that's the one we chose. And so we wanted a good UI, because you have to show that to people. And we had to, there was like a live stream. I think every location had a few people going and presenting it on the live stream as well. So we needed to have a good UI. We needed to have the basic functionality, and then we needed to have at least one standout thing. So at that time we chose AR, because at that time it was still I think it was still being it was there, but it wasn't complete in any way. And some components were still we had to modify a lot of the base package to actually get it to fully run. And but thankfully we had thankfully we could do it in 5 hours. And the judges over there, like not judges, but like there was like basic evaluators just to decide who gets to present. So they liked it a lot. So we presented it. But even then, the hub voice competition was actually rather good, because there were people who had genuinely good ideas, genuinely good implementation, and thankfully, I think the hub round was very close as well. But the actual voting round for the entire hackathon, I think we tied like the last day. I think it was very, very close. It was like 115, and we were like, all of us were just monitoring the entire thing. I mean, who gets more? And I think the next day we saw, okay, there's a 2-vote difference, and we got that. So that's how we finally kind of announced, okay, we know we won, because the deadline we were still like 115. So it was anxiety inducing.
I can tell you what actually happened there. When we noticed that it was very close, we decided to we hadn't voted yet as the admin and staff, so we made our votes without consulting each other. So it was all just like, that's why the little vote changed at the very end to make the deciding vote.
Okay, thank you. But yes, it was. I think, and the thing is, we actually assumed that it was like they said 3 prizes, so we assumed it was first, second, and third. We later learned it was not first, second, and third. So if we came second, that there would not have been a prize. So we learned that later. So earlier, when it was tight, we were assuming, okay, even if we lose, we have second prize. That was not how it was. So they were like different categories. Thankfully, we won, or else it would have been very different. And then. So then there were like problems shipping the trophy. So I finally got it at Flutter Europe when Simon gave it to me. He realized I was there. So, but at least like it was a great experience.
With me to like Flutter Interact and Flutter Europe and like every other Flutter meetup, just to make sure if I see someone, like, here's your trophy.
Yeah.
So I did not know I was going to get it at Flutter Europe, but thankfully I did. I mean, I think he forgot he had it at that point, and like after the conference, when I told him, and he was like, "Okay, yeah, is that you?" And thankfully we got it, but it was like a 4-month wait. So I think that's the only thing maybe he can improve this time. But everything else was really amazing.
Think much of an improvement this time around because of COVID. So we've we've actually been speaking to the trophy manufacturer, and there's actually a national shortage of transparent acrylic, apparently, because the manufacturing facilities aren't operating.
That's new.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, who'd have thunk it, right? So we're going to be looking into. We have to obviously wait for the supply to come in before the trophies can be finished and sent out, but. We're also going to be sending out T-shirts and other things. So these international packages, we had this experience last year. Last year we sent out T-shirts to lots and lots of meetups, and I'm not sure what percentage came back, but a lot of them ended up being returned because no one went to pick them up from the post offices. No one went to.
What did you do with them?
They ended up getting like handed out free to people, just T-shirts, right? But a lot of them ended up getting returned because people didn't want to pay the duty, the import tax, because the T-shirts are quite heavy to have in bulk, right? So, and we paid quite a lot on shipping. So we last year a lot of the money was wasted on just shipping those T-shirts, and they got returned, which is a shame. So that's one of the reasons why this year we chose not to try and do something like that, but to do something where the winners are getting the T-shirts, and if they don't get their winning thing, that's their choice, right? But it's not something that we're going to give up front and waste the valuable money on that we get for these sort of competitions.
We have some more questions from the chat here, and I would like to ask this. So what can you do to make a text scrollable?
In case the text is multi-line.
Yes.
Okay. There's a really simple option for this. Set the max lines to null.
Yeah, and that's a really weird property.
Yeah.
So when you
max lines is set to 1.
I think 1. Yeah, it's max lines 1, and if you set it to null, then it lets it expand down. And it was a really, I think I covered one something, but it was a really weird property that I found out. And I actually pinged someone. Can we improve this?
So
Everyone found out that like it's something weird.
just to be clear, that basically doesn't set any maximum. So as you type, it will get taller, but you still need to have it in a limited box and set a max. I think it's limited, or a constrained box and set a maximum height. Otherwise, because you want it to start scrolling when it gets like 4 lines high, right? Or put in a fixed size and with max line set to null, and it will scroll within those, like that small area of the screen. You need to have both. Yeah, sorry.
And when that text thing, for example, in a text field, if you set a max lines to something else, so for example, I want 4 lines, that expands to 4 lines by default. And that's a very annoying property because it doesn't expand to 4 lines. It stays at 4 lines by default. So even if you have a 10-line text, it will still stay 4 lines. Even if you have 2 lines, that's a very, and even there you have to set it to null just to make it expand like you expect it to.
So the fix for that, as I said, is wrap it in a size box so that as it expands, it fixes to 4 lines, and you can do that by you can calculate your 4 lines dynamically or just set fixed height based on your font size. But yeah, you can calculate dynamically by getting the default text style and times in the font size by 4 and multiply by the line height, and you'll get like the height of the text.
But I think this behavior can be changed, right? I mean, these
those little things. What I would really like. So I'll have to. We'll take this offline. But I want to just talk about this here. So those of us in the community have been talking about doing some chat like this, which might go on into the future where we'll have people from everywhere over, and we can bring up these issues. And these are things that we as a community come together and list them somewhere, and not just create these random tickets. And then maybe the community themselves can take these issues on themselves to fix and PR and put back into the framework.
Okay, the next question is, I think I asked Pawan here, what would you do if you want to show a chart with charts Flutter? How would you get the data and how would you model or architecture this?
To be honest, like I have never used charts in Flutter yet.
I thought you did.
Never used because I never had this use case. But yeah, I mean, I think it should be pretty easy. What I'll do is like if I'm getting some data from an API, then I'll probably create a respective model for that chart, like whatever data I have to show. And yeah, I mean, it's very simple. Like you don't have to deal it with in terms of chart only. Like, you know, it's like you have some data and you have to represent it. So just grab that data and see what kind of properties your charts takes. And then maybe you just have to pass the data. But I think someone who has already worked with charts can better explain, like, you know, if there is something which I'm missing in this question, because yeah, he's saying like there are a few tutorials, but I think there are many tutorials. This is like I am the only guy who have never used it, so that's why I think maybe Devin have used it, so maybe Devin can answer.
I just looked.
A lot of times I had my own implementations, but the thing is, the thing with charts is actually genuinely hard to. It's not as easy to use as you think. Like sometimes there's so many possibilities with charts that you forget. Okay, there's these properties I need to set or whatever. So ideally, it's very easy. Like if you want to draw a basic graph, you're just considering an x and a y. And a lot of charts simply don't have they don't have it that simple. You have to have like 4 or 5 properties, and then mapping it is not that easy. So I would really consider what is the type of chart you're trying to go with. And a lot of times, genuinely, it is easier to draw yourself than sometimes it is easier to draw it yourself than do it with a graph. But if it's hard, then they have a lot of them.
So I've included links to the example gallery for Flutter charts and the Flutter charts example package. There's loads of examples out there. They're in the chat. However, yeah, as Devin was saying, like I've never used this library. I think I maybe tried it once and found the same sort of problem, like to manipulate the models and to get it exact right, like layout and look that I wanted was really difficult, because there's just so many options and it's so complicated. And then you end up having to override a class from the chart library and have to change certain parameters, and it just gets really complicated. I ended up just drawing my own. I ended up just custom paint, take the width, divide it by my whatever number I want, and draw some bars, and then I could even animate them myself and do whatever I want. That is one of the things that we get with so this is the interesting thing, right? That to choose that option to do it custom is hella difficult if you're trying to do that on like iOS or Android. Like you end up like just to, I mean, you can just do custom drawing, sure, but like to actually get all the layout system working and the measure and to put sub widgets in and all this kind of stuff, it becomes really complicated proposition to do and a really heavyweight option in these platforms. Whereas in Flutter, you just put it in and you can just hack away at the code and it works. You can hot reload your way to infinity, right? So you can really simplify your life.
I see this also happening very often for me. So for example, I had to draw a progress bar on a video and I simply drew a bar on my own. And at the end, I discovered, oh, there is a progress bar widget in the SDK, which I could have used, which is actually the same implementation as I did. So writing it on your own is working, and it is as good as what the SDK is delivering most of the time.
I actually spoke to Matt Carroll this morning because we spoke about his widget workshop yesterday, and in his widget workshop he did this fading edge to his widgets, and he didn't know that there's a shader mask widget, right? Which that job, and he's showing. But the key concept is not like, because his tutorial goes around why you want to do it, how you animate it. There's lots of other stuff, right? So it's not invalidating that. But the very final bit, which is to use he used some blend modes to fade off the edges and do this in Paint and to draw the stuff yourself. You can do that with widgets with a shader mask instead, which kind of simplifies things, right? However, shader mask still doesn't work on web yet. There's other issues around that, but it's just interesting to know that there are a huge number of widgets out there. It's still difficult even for us to know what they all are, and it's just like, just imagine that you came up with a problem that you have, you make a widget and you put that in the library. Still, it's very hard for people to find that under the use case that they want, because you're describing something visual with text, and we all have different ways of thinking about the problem. So yeah, in the end, don't worry if there's, like, it doesn't matter as long as your end result is there and you've done it. If you later on you want to refactor and say, oh, get rid of that, replace it with a widget that's already existing, great, do that. But don't worry that you don't know all these widgets up front, right? You can, as long as you can still get to the end result, that's great. You know, you've done what you need to do.
Happened with me many times. You know, I just had to have this close button, so that cross button, right? And I always used to write like, you know, an icon button and giving it an icon like that. And then I realized that there is a widget itself that's named close button. I was like, really, man, like I have written it so many times, and now I'm getting like, you know, realization that, okay, there is a widget for that as well.
I think there's also a back button as well for the back arrow.
Yeah.
I think
okay, we have a few more questions. Let's go to the questions so we are not piling up. So how do you manage all the business logic in your apps? State holds your data, but how do you manage the interactions?
Oh, I know
State
what
management. Oh, Hillel.
I think I know what Hillel's getting at here. He likes Redux. He uses Redux in his apps. Unidirectional data flow.
Yeah.
To be honest, I'd recommend from this isn't specifically Flutter only, right? This is just apps in general. So from my experience from doing Android apps and previous apps, I started with Android 1.4, 1.3, whatever the earliest one was, very first device. And all through that life cycle, we'll come to where we are right now. I've learned that there is no one solution that fits everything, first of all. Like it can change. But one definite thing I've learned is make your models immutable. You will save yourself so much hassle. Having data that just changes on its own without so basically you have one piece of asynchronous code over here, like network call, that changes some item over here in your code. You've just broken some chain of responsibility in your app, and suddenly when your UI, when you press a button in UI, something else changes on your screen. Like, why did that happen? Well, it's because you changed the state and didn't notify the UI should update, right? And that's a very critical
point.
In Flutter.
Immutable data. Maxim, do you want to jump in and tell us something about Freezed?
Yes. Oh, like I was just itching to say it. Like I've been using Freeze a fair bit because I think my background is a bit like Simon's. I'm kind of like an Android immigrate, as it were, into Flutter. And that's the kind of thing, like, for instance, doing Kotlin for a few years, you really miss those, like, immutable by default data structures. So I was also actually going to say the same thing about Hillel's question, is that really what you want to do is really go with the whole unidirectional flow model. And for instance, the interactions shouldn't be any different from the state. Like, I'm very much in the camp of bringing kind of like my experience of using MMVM in Android basically to what I do in Flutter. So for instance, the interactions I put out into essentially the classes that act as my view models, like I would have in Android. So basically where the state lives is also where the interactions go when I'm architecting the app. So I'm very much in the camp of not wanting to have the interaction logic live in the UI. Like, for me, the UI really is as dumb as possible. So it really is just, I try to think of it as essentially, in functional languages terms, just like a function, a pure function. There's a pure function that takes your state and turns that into UI. And I think that works really well with like the way Flutter works in terms of its widget tree. So like in terms of interactions, I really try and stick with that unidirectional flow and have the interactions go back out of the UI, change the state, and then it's that change state that then changes the widget tree. So I tend to have actually very few stateful widgets. Almost everything's for me a stateless widget, because my state tends to be outside the widget tree. So the widget tree is just reflecting basically the state I have in what essentially are view models for Android people.
It is interesting that that the difference between Flutter and the other ones is that our UI, because it's rendered within inside the application, we can test the UI, right? So we can actually give it some model data, see if it renders correctly, do golden tests, all sorts of other fun things. However, it does mean that people do this thing where they just chuck all their code straight into the UI, and it still is. I mean, this is the thing, right? There is no functionally, there is no difference to having your function here or over here. It's all about organization and maintainability of your code base, right? So you can go find it and fix it, right? I do say this all the time, but it's just to be clear that your entire app could be one file, right? It could be one massive file with everything in it. But don't do that, right? Because that is a really bad thing, because you can't maintain it or organize it, right? So most of the problems that we have in code is naming and code organization, right? Because we need to be able to find these complex structures and define them and work with them. It's not necessarily, so that's what all these patterns and architecture are all about, is just how we manipulate and use the data to accomplish our final goal.
So we have here the question if Freeze, how it does compare to build value. And I think Freeze is just a newer version. It's the same concept. Both have immutable data types and generate the code for this. Freeze is just newer and has a much more elegant API, I would say. So
can I chime in? Because I told Pascal before that I had been playing around with Freeze for a bit. So, and I was actually using built value a bit prior to that. So there are, I think Remy's done, like, I'm a big fan of Freeze. I'll say that up front, so I'm biased. But I think Remy's done a great job of it, kind of like looking at built value. And there's nothing bad about built value, but there was just things that like could be perhaps more convenient or easier. Or people, for instance, coming from Swift or Kotlin miss, like, for instance, the when.
Copy with.
Yeah, copy with. And for me, it was like when. And like, I think I actually chimed in on a built value issue asking for essentially using something like when with generated enums. And that's basically when I saw Freeze, I went, oh my God, Remy's implemented that. That's exactly what I wanted. So I think there's just these nice little extras that he's done that kind of take what built value did and sort of just like improve the developer UX, if you like. So I think it's just, yeah, it's essentially the same, it does the same functional thing, like Simon said, same functional thing as what built value did, but I just find it sort of gels more with the way I work.
Do you know what, you've solved, literally, I've not used Freeze yet. I haven't had a chance to use it, and I'm just feeling now that after you saying that, I want to use that in my next project.
If you want to see more on this, I posted a link in the chat with a video I recorded this week exactly about immutability in Dart. So let's continue with the next question. Who here is using VPN services? I don't. Anyone?
No, but what they're asking for is not actually anything to do with Flutter directly, right? So they're asking, is it possible to access VPN settings and set and enable them within Flutter Dart without manually recreating a VPN client or something accessing default by simply without doing okay. So I think I get what he's talking about. I think he's asking, can you add a proxy to your app to that without changing your proxy set, essentially your VPN settings of your operating system? Am I reading that correctly? Because he's saying without manually recreating a VPN client.
I understand it the same way.
Or the other way of reading this question is he wants to know, can you change the Android and iOS VPN settings through Flutter and Dart? And the answer is yes, you can do both. The problem obviously is if there's no package that already does this, you have to do it. So there is method channels. So if you do want to communicate with the operating system, you can do so over a method channel, and you can make a function in Android that says enable VPN with these settings, and it goes and calls the APIs for doing such a thing.
I bet there's also a plugin for that.
If there's not already a plugin for that, then you can
please create one.
Yeah, exactly right. But also saying that you can override. There is HTTP overrides as a global, and that allows you to override the behavior of the HTTP framework globally across your application. So you can actually put in there like disabling. I would not recommend this, but for debug purposes, this might be good. And that's disabling the certificate verification, for example. You can do that globally so that if you're developing against self-signed certificates, you can work with those and similar things. You can actually set up the proxy settings as well.
And this is something, just in terms of network, that I think is pretty much a fact that catches a lot of people out, is that Flutter ships with its own HTTP stack. So for instance, Flutter, like if you have an HTTP proxy set in your operating system, by default, Flutter will not use those settings because it's not using the default, like I'm familiar with Android. So on Android, for instance, like it will not use the Android's HTTP client because Flutter ships with its own one. So it will not by default use the HTTP setting that you've got set in your in Android, for instance. You need to basically grab those settings yourself and make use of them in Flutter versus, like, say, in native code, that would just, the HTTP client framework would automatically pick that up for you.
I do want to make a quick point on this, that some people come to Flutter and see that as a flaw, as a problem, right? But the key point here is it brings because it brings an entire HTTP stack in, it now supports HTTP 2 across all devices that support Flutter, right? You get HTTP 2. This is still not possible in a lot of devices. So you can pick up an old Android device. There's no way you're going to get that by not shipping it with your app anyway. So a lot of the time on Android apps, you'd ship OK HTTP, and you'd ship all these other things, which is basically the entire HTTP stack with your application. They integrate that into Android now, but still, there's things like that you get problems like when you're trying to do uploads, you want to show a progress bar, you need to upload in smaller chunks so you can actually not just wait for one round trip to happen. And these are things that you have problems with Android, but you just don't get with directly with the Flutter library, Dart and Flutter stack, because you have more control over it. It's the same reason why Flutter ships with the Dart environment, and you get the nice garbage collector that comes with Dart, which has young space scavenging and all these modern things that you only now get in, I think it's Nougat and above on Android. So again, you get all these advantages by using Flutter that they're not there visible from the outset. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes, I'd agree with that. And also, like, I don't see it. I agree with you. I see it as an advantage that Flutter ships basically all its own things itself. It's basically like vendoring in all the kind of common framework functionality that you get. I think the only missing piece there is possibly that it's like one little bit of integration that isn't there by default, that to pick up that setting and apply it. Because I've done this like in multiple apps where I've just written my own little bit of code that grabs the native proxy setting and then apply it in the Dart HTTP client. So, but overall, like, you're right. Like, I think that's the beauty of Flutter is, and this is something I've taken like really to heart coming from Android, is like we've often had to just do all this crazy, essentially patching around old versions of the Android framework, because you're having to support devices that are like 4 versions or 5 versions old, and the vendors have basically abandoned them like 5 years ago and they're never going to update anything. Whereas the beauty of Flutter is you're always, like, your app ships the whole Flutter SDK essentially, the bits that you're using anyway with tree shaking. So you're always getting the very latest. So if you want to ship something that's like only just been bug fixed in master, okay, that might be a little bit crazy to do in production, but you've got the choice to do it. Like, it's not something that you can't do. It's now your choice to do it or not.
I also want to make a point here that other people don't realize, which I've used to great advantage. Sorry, you just brought something up, and I'm just going to cut in here. You can check out your stable branch and then go and cherry pick in any bug fixes you need onto your own branch, and then keep that branch in your local repo, and that's your production branch for your application. And then you can push that up to your own fork of the remote, and then store that as in your README, saying you need to build with this fork to compile that application. And you can take advantage of some of these things, so you don't go into the bleeding edge of all these other changes, but only picking in the cherry picking in the fixes that you need for your build. You know, these are all possibilities. That, yeah.
Speaking about the next question here, so if we have a UI, and how do we make sure that it looks correct on multiple screen sizes? I remember there was a library which allows you to scale it on a device and show different screen sizes, but I cannot remember the name.
So there's responsive scaffold.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the one you're talking about, but there is, I think there's Adios Daniel. I can't remember, probably not saying his name right. He'll grow. He'll have a go at me after this. He did. I forgot.
It's this one here.
Yeah. Is that the one by him?
It's from.
Well, it's on the Flutter community. So that is
Rody.
That is Rody's one. That one's more about change. It's a scaffold that changes it to show like the menu. So when you go on the desktop, you automatically get the menu. But there's one that you can actually do where it has a progress bar, like drag bars on the screen to change the width and height and stuff. So you can develop on desktop and see your app and what it look like on mobile. So you can responsively change it. It's
was that device layout or something like that?
Yeah, it's a device scaffold, I think. I don't know. Yeah,
device layout or not. I don't think scaffold.
Device simulator looks good.
This is something.
Yes, this one.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one.
Yeah, and I think it's rather easy to use it, so you can test all your different screen sizes by using a single slider. What I also did is when you write widget tests, you can define the screen size of the widget test. And so you could also generate a test and run it on multiple screen sizes at once, or one after another. So what I do is I define screen sizes where my application should run on, a tablet and a small phone, like an iPhone SE. And I have to make sure that all my widget tests are running correctly on all devices.
I think what Simon was mentioning was device preview. He made this library, I guess the guy he's mentioning. Yeah, this one.
That's the one.
Yeah,
but there's no GIF.
Yeah,
there it is.
So this allows you, if you look at the bottom, this allows you to pick like all your different devices from presets, all your different screen sizes. You can customize it however you want. So you can actually see what it would look like in your app, like Inception wise, you know, what your app would look like. You just wrap your entire app with like the device preview. So really nice way of you get the hot reload capabilities. You're seeing it all live. However, I had to say another thing I've done and we've been doing with the Hack 20 website is just, obviously if you develop for web, if you develop build your app for web or for desktop, then you get the advantage of just changing the window size wherever you want and you can see the reactions. But under the hood, all these things just use the media query. So if you're curious about how you do all these things, the two widgets you want to look at a layout builder to get the parent constraints, and you can on the width, you can change something like which widgets you give back. And then media query, you can look at the size of your screen. So you can say, is the width of my screen a small 360 dip device? Then I want to show mobile, or normally less than 600 is mobile. There is a document on the Android website, building apps for multiple screen sizes. And that will give you a little graph which tells you the brackets in which you have a small tablet, large tablet, small phone, desktop, all these different things. And that will help you choose your breakpoint, which are the point which you change your layout.
By the way, I have done the same thing in my package Velocity X, I'm working on the documentation. Once it will be published, then like it supports all these things. Like if you want to like write specific for web, you can do that. Web or mobile is the, two options where mostly you will try to switch. Okay, desktop is there, but if something is working on web, most probably it will work on your desktop if you have a size constraint, like if you are not trying to change your desktop size again and again. But if you write your UI for mobile and web, then mostly they are gonna work. But so there is a widget called VX device, which is if you want to provide two kind of layouts, one is for mobile and one for web. And there is something called VX responsive, where you can say large, small, extra large, and all those breakpoints which are there. And if you'll go to, there is a material responsive guidelines. Okay, and if you will go to that site, they have specified how many gutters should be there, what should be, what are the breakpoints of different sizes, how many number of columns you can like have for this particular breakpoint. So all those things are being done. There was a package already made by Google, so I got some idea from there. It was part of, I don't remember, but there was a package, I think Flutter by Google, something like that. Okay, some package which was also having some other kind of use cases. They actually divided it in multiple packages later. So you might be getting the idea, right? There is one package like that where they had this feature, like that showcasing view and all those things. So in that particular sample, they also did this material responsive thing, which they were also using in their applications. And that's what the idea came from, and I also tried to make the same thing. So yeah, I'll probably share a link very soon.
I know we want to get to the next question, but I do want to bring something up on top. It's on topic because everyone's going to get this bug. If you're ever using Layout Builder, you'll probably get a problem with intrinsic width or intrinsic height, because you cannot pass intrinsic width and height. You cannot put intrinsic width and height around a Layout Builder, right? Because Layout Builder doesn't know until it builds what widgets are the children, so it cannot get the intrinsic dimensions of the children. This is a known issue. This is just the way the layout system works. By design. There's no bug here. There's nothing to fix. Okay. So the problem with some of these widgets, which the sort of that switching between mobile and non-mobile view, is that you need to switch out which set of the widgets you're using, or how you're laying those widgets out. The trick behind that is you can do it without a layout builder. You can actually detect the width and choose to build both sets of widgetry at the same time, and it will know the intrinsic width and height. So there is a way around that, but just to be aware that that does exist and is not a bug. It is a feature.
Okay, going to the next question, which is about file sharing. And because most of you do not know this from their mind, I quickly picked up the pull request, which was mentioned here. And it's this one, which adds file sharing support to the share plugin, the official share plugin. It has many.
Right now we only have like text to share. I think the share.share only says text and nothing else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I jump in as a kind of like a meta kind of response to this? Is that like you can just use, for the time being at least, the PR. Like it's probably not ideal in a production app, because some things that people don't know about is pub is that you can point to not just package names on pubdev, but you can just supply a Git URL and a reference to a particular branch. So you could just basically try it out. Exactly, try out the PR. But then also, I would say don't do that. Of course, if this is going into production, probably at least grab this branch into your own repo and control it that way by referring to your own repo rather than just someone else's. So you're not just pulling in someone else's repo branch, which might go away. So I have to say, like, I was waiting on a PR on the Sentry plugin for about a month and a half or so before that got merged and it's fine. Like, especially sometimes, like there was one actually PR and Sentry for Sentry, I think lasted 18 months or something like that before it actually got merged because of the whole churn that happened with web support. So sometimes you do need to just maintain your own fork or a copy of someone else's, essentially a fork of a package for a while. But Pub makes it so easy. It's brilliant.
I am curious as to what branches everyone uses to develop on here. So let's get down the list. So I use Dev mainly. Pascal?
Same here.
Beta.
Oh, he's a bit more safe. Gone.
Yeah, I tend to be on beta, but I have been all the way to like master in desperation sometimes to grab a particular fix, but mostly beta or stable, unless there's some reason to be on a less adventurous branch.
I use Dev, but there was like recent change in terms of that they added that visual density property for like most of the widgets there. So for one of my project, I had to like switch back to beta. So it's like in one system I am using Dev, and in other I am using beta, because I'm still not the fan of there is one other like way of handling multiple branches altogether. What is the name of that?
I mean FEM.
FEM.
But it was not working for me for some reason.
FEM doesn't work didn't work for me on Windows. I've seen and I saw multiple bugs with it, which were kind of obvious bugs. But if it works for you, brilliant. That's great.
But if you're on a Mac or Linux like I am, like I actually tend to just do what FEM does essentially myself, and I just have links to different working directories. One thing that is a good hint from the dark
Pascal's library.
Yeah, you can also my bash script if you're on a Unix system. It does the same thing. It pins a single commit of the Flutter repository.
I can try.
I did not come across that before. I'll try it out.
But the reason I use Dev only is because of desktop, I guess. Like if it will come to beta, then I'll be on beta for I
honestly want just thinking about how the actual local Flutter tool works. It just uses the cache folder for all of those artifacts.
Yes. Yeah.
If they were to just this is me making up a new PR for the team, the new request for the team to do. But if you were to basically name that folder based on the current commit or something.
There were so many discussions on that. I think there were like 3 pull requests requesting that, and they were all closed.
Yeah,
I gave up on this.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, there's a big problem at the moment, which is when you really want to change those branches, it downloads like 300 megabytes of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I just feel like if the downloads were just cached, I would be okay with that, right? Because it's that wait for the change. Whereas if they were just cached and it knows it already has the same file downloaded, use the cached one and just switch them out. It doesn't matter if you have to extract it again and clean up those cached resources. The download is the slow bit, right? Even on a fast internet connection, 200 meg is not going to be like split second.
I'm used to it now.
At Google, we have gigabit internet.
Going back to the share plugin, I think the last update was 12 days ago, so don't worry, it takes some time. Just be patient and wait a bit.
Yeah, this is your commit. Yeah, so the other thing is triage does take place. It takes time though. There's so many tickets being created, and the other. This is going to go. I don't want to go off topic here, but I do want to bring this up. Just because there's about 50,000 tickets in the repo does not make all of them valid. Doesn't make all of them bugs. Does not make all of them these things. So when you see, React has this many and Flutter has this many, Flutter's got more bugs, right? Or more issue tickets, therefore it's got more bugs, therefore it's worse. That's not how it works. You have to remember that the fact that it means that React may not have as many reported. There's probably a lot more that are unseen. I'm giving React as an example here, but any library, right? So the point here is just the number of issue tickets at the moment. Like people will raise one like this, which is a feature request with some code that goes back into the library. And when team get around to doing it, hopefully it will be merged and it'll be triaged and pulled in, and then we all get to take advantage of that in our base code.
Yeah, I had a same discussion with Matt also when I invited him for Flutter Stream Day, and we actually discussed about these things so that people can know, like, what Googlers think about it, like, with the number of issues which Flutter has on its repository. And I think he also said the same thing again, like, there are many things, there are many use cases, there are a lot of features as issues. There are a lot of, when you are targeting different platforms, then obviously there will be different kind of problems here and there. And
you can imagine that the number of tickets for web or desktop is going to be huge compared to Android iOS because they're now stable,
Exactly.
And they also encourage you to actually give them your issues or whatever, like feature requests. And some of them are pretty big, but they take some like significant time to be solved as well. So for example, there was a bug on the Google Maps thing, which took like a GB of RAM without you knowing. There was a memory leak, which took like 6 to 8 months to fix. And like for us, we had to switch to Mapbox and Leaflet just for like, because there was simply no way, because they had to solve the entire thing. But the thing is, these bugs do exist, and I think if you just have too many, I think some of these which are actually serious kind of get lost in there. Maybe that's something.
Yeah,
this is
I would say.
Be gone.
Sorry, I was just going to say exactly that. Like I've been tracking a bug which is in that same boat as well. Like it was actually the builder functionality that they added like 4 versions back, and there was a bug file when it broke in master or dev, and basically over the last 6 months it's trickled down all the way through into stable, and the bug's still open, but now basically all the channels have this bug and it's all broken just because like I think the fuzz team were just a little bit overwhelmed and this one bug slipped through the cracks because there's so many.
The thing is, you have to remember is the Flutter team is relatively small. Even if they had to ramp up new staff and bring new people in, it takes time to onboard people as well. So there's a massive lag time to compare to even the knowledge that the community own right now in terms of how Flutter works and the underlying stuff. So if you find a bug, examine it yourself, try and see what's causing the issue, and if you can identify the cause of it, even making your issue ticket say, look, it's going down this code path, it's doing this thing, and that's where the problem is, it's doing this thing there. Even if you can't fix it, you've done the analysis, right? So that when they get that ticket, they read it and go, oh, you're right. They look at the code and go, oh no, you're right, I can fix that right now, or patch it and we'll put it straight into the repo. You've just cut down on a lot of time. But just making an issue ticket that says has code does not work, something like that, it's not going to get you anywhere, and that ticket's going to be closed, and it's a waste of everyone's time. So the more
going to the next question here,
tickets, the better.
Yeah. Going to the next question here, that's a common one. If you run into an error, you want to show a message to the user. But what if the part of the code you are currently in doesn't have a context to get access to the scaffold to shoot a snack bar? How do you handle this in your applications?
So the first thing, don't ever pass the build context to your backend. No. I can tell you what I would do, and that is pass a function. Because we can do second order functions, you can pass a function that shows your message to the user to your backend that contains in its nature a reference to the build context from its scope. And then when your backend code finishes, it executes that function, and then it's going to have the front end access to the front end with it. So in essence, you're passing a little bit of logic from your front end to your back end for it to execute on completion. And inside that, you can do like if mounted or check to make sure your UI is still alive.
So what's happening is you have the user interface and it triggers some code, some HTTP function, for example. Then you go back into your logic on your domain logic, and there the error throws. And so you also have to pass in a callback so that you can handle this error. And then you pass it back upwards.
So
to the user interface.
That's essentially how it works. But a nice way, what you can do with Flutter code is because you've got async and await, that kind of happens for you if you do try catch. So by just wrapping your async and await with the try catch, you can then put your logic for displaying your snack bar, or just calling out to a separate class that does that, or other UI functionality to display your snack bar in the front end. So it's just the fact that there's an error has trickled down, or callback has happened with your error information to your front end. Your front end handles the UI. It's not necessarily your UI that is driven from your back end of your application.
Yeah. Errors are adding type safe though. If you want to be type safe, use free steel classes and return the value, which might be also an error case.
And adding on to whatever they said, see, the context is looking for a scaffold in between. And if you do not have that, if nothing else works, there's a package, like just use a toast package or something similar just to display an error which does not require. I don't think that requires a context.
There is a nice one. There is a nice package called I think it's called Flush Bar, which is very similar to Snack Bar and performs more of a desktop kind of experience and web experience for the larger screens as well. I do find this is a problem though in terms of the scaffold does a lot for us, like displaying errors and displaying snack bars is something you want to do, but I don't want to have to use a scaffold for that. And I find it quite often is the case. So I end up with a scaffold just for that one thing to display because there is no abstraction that snack bar uses to say like, find me my host parent, whatever it is, and show snack bar. It's just not, there's too much in scaffold right now. It's very much one massive widget with lots of code in it.
There are many packages which uses and displays, these overlays. So that's pretty good, I guess.
One thing, please, people do not use Android's toasts. I think there's a package called Android Toast. There's no offense to the package. If you need to display one, great. But it's not like you've just completely defeated the purpose of Flutter by doing that, right? Like, yeah, you've limited yourself to one platform. Your display is now done by the framework. You're going to have a hard time customizing that nice little toast message that pops up. There's so many reasons I could not even name them as to not do that, right? So the worst case is you could just display a nice rounded container with rounded borders in a color with your message and use an animated size to make it pop up from the bottom of the screen. And you've just done what Snackbar does. It's not difficult.
Yeah, that doesn't look either like, you are using Material app.
And you get 1.5 Android Toast come up with a gray box around it. Yeah.
I think like the Android guys should have eliminated it long
like
back.
Native code, right? I mean, that still calls native. When you go to native code, then you're just the next a package for something as simple as a toast suddenly would not work on your next platform, and that is not something that you should be doing on native.
I should be blamed for that as well. Because I actually created a video about how to create a package or plugin of a toast in Android and iOS.
It's your fault.
So just to teach people, I did that, and then I realized, there were many packages with the same name, like Toast, Flutter Toast. I was like, okay, I did something wrong here.
I do think though that this is another thing the team has identified, that now when I don't know if you make a new Android package in PubSpec, YAML now says publish to none.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that you don't get these people that are publishing packages of their projects by mistake, or publishing like these things that they're making just all over the place. And what we do not need, and I think I tweeted about this, I think NPM now has like 5 million packages on it, and it's like got a package for every small little thing.
Yeah,
that's kind of great in one way, but also very bad in another, right? So I feel like we need to make sure that pub.dev does not become another NPM, right? I feel like that's a very important point.
We were discussing that recently. I don't remember where, but for example, there's not a lot of stuff that's stopping me from just parking a good name and then just like waiting for I know like hundreds of good names for packages that might come. I push a package which does something, not like a blank package. It does something which you might say it is functional, but very little. And suddenly you at what point do you draw the line where you will to remove my package?
Oh no, I'm not. I don't think this is the thing, right? Like this whole topic around pub and a package manager is a huge problem. I mean, problem's the wrong word. Issue to understand would be the better way of terming it. So in terms of like, recently there was no thumbs up. Now, if you've noticed you got thumbs up, you can like something and it adds to your favorites, right? That was not a thing before, because that user interaction can be abused if done incorrectly. So it takes a long time to develop something like that, make sure that it's going to work for everyone. And the same goes for the scoring. So these systems, you have to put a lot of thought behind every feature that you're going to put into something like pub.dev. It's not a small undertaking. It has to be maintained as well, or deprecated and all this kind of stuff. So just what you don't want is what I'm going to say. This is not in a bad way, but not necessarily directly in a bad way. But what Apple does is that you don't want like the Google team or anyone at Google to say, no, your package is bad. Like your package is one line. I don't like it. You're not going to put your package. I'm taking your package off. We want the freedom to do what we need to do, but we just need to be responsible by doing it. I think that's the key point here, right? Like, I personally released, I think it was called After Layout. It's a package, and it literally is one line, but it was released when no one knew that one little line trick, and it also does it in a nice way that you just add as a mixin to your widget, and then after the layout of that widget's been done, it calls your code. And this is a very standard thing to do in terms of the use case on there is like showing a dialogue. So I'll give you a good example. I had this problem personally when I wanted to deep link into an application, and once the UI was displayed, I then wanted to show like some confirmation to the user. Right now, from a deep link, like it's an asynchronous operation. You need to wait until one thing is done before you do another. It's complicated. This solves that problem, but it's one line. What you know what I mean? Like, I don't need to share the information. So there are other ways of doing this, right? So a package is not the only way. I use gists for a lot of my stuff, and I share those around. You could easily make yourself a little blog, and we also have the Flutter community medium where you can share tips and tricks, right? So there's lots of other avenues to sharing code and ideas and stuff, not necessarily pub packages.
Can I just pick
As
up
an
on that, Tom, because
apology-
I think.
Yeah.
Oh. So I'll
As
very
an
quickly
apology
just say.
Go ahead, please.
Sorry, Pascal. All I was going to say was like perhaps like there's a good reason to have something like central and curated like PubDev, but also I think we should look outside, like again, to the Node community. And for instance, what the Node creator Ryan Dahl's doing with Deno, where they've gone away from having a central repository like NPM, and so Deno is just basically using essential URLs for their packages. So, and because there's nothing in Pub that makes us use PubDev, I think we should also think about like whether PubDev should be the central point of truth for official packages. Because there's no reason why we can't do Git rep or Git URLs or HTTP URLs.
We can do that, I think.
You can at the moment, right? So there's nothing that's limiting us to pub.dev. There's a separate. So first of all, questions we get all the time. Can I do my own pub.dev? Can I make my own? Yes, you can. The code is out there. The server code is open source. It's all open source. I think it's actually called Pub Server. I think it is a package that does what pub.dev does. It's all accessible. You can do all this, and there is actually another service. The name escapes me right now, which is actually out there right now, which is you can make your own private repository, and they will host it for you on a web URL. And it's I think that it's free for a certain amount, and then you pay for it, whatever the deal is. But there's another service that you can use and keep all that stuff private. But again, there's no reason why we can't just do that yourself internally or keep it all private if you need to, and do your own set that is smaller. I do like what Golang does. So Golang actually have a website. I think it's godoc.org. It escapes me. It might be the wrong website. It's been a while. But they actually had one documentation site which has documentation on every package ever made. So as soon as a package is generated with Godoc, it adds it to the website. So you kind of get one location that has every documentation for every package, because it uses the URL for the imports, the Git URL. But they this was a while ago since I was using it. They've transitioned to having a proper package dependency manager in the local host now, rather than just direct URLs. As much as Deno has done that, I think they're probably going to have some other issues that they're going to have to. You end up having to have a middle layer somewhere. You can't just go from one to the other. Also, who do you trust, right? Like that URL can change, right? So there
as much as I like the discussion here, I have to.
Yeah, let's go with the questions. Let's see what
questions
people
are
talking about.
piling up. So let's get a quick
Let's go. Let's just pipe through some questions. Let's go.
Exactly. So first of all, Pavan has to apologize for his Android Toast package, so he has to answer the next question.
I'm really sorry, man. I'm really, really sorry. But I had this disclaimer, don't make, like, this is just for learning purpose, that how to create plugins in Flutter. Don't make a package like a different plugin. This was the mistake which I did. I actually told them the idea that you can also publish it. so I think that's where things went wrong.
So Pawan, what do you think of this question?
I think you can override did change dependency. At that time, I think you have the access to context, and maybe you can use media query directly from there.
In the init state, you haven't yet built the tree, so you don't really have a clear idea of what the size is going to be.
So I'm going to give some feedback on this. On this. Media query.size comes down from the global scope from coming down parent. You can theoretically get it in its state if you weren't using the platform widget to do so. Like it is accessible. I would consider this a bug in the framework. I've had this problem several times where I want to get the media query size, but I don't want to depend on it. By getting the media query you're depending on the change. So when the size changes, the widget changes. I may not want that capability, but there is like to enable that option, people can abuse it, and then they go, well, why isn't my widget rebuilding when I change my screen size, right? So you kind of got the two sides of the coin there. So just be aware, you can do it. Did change dependencies where to do it because it gets called straight after in its state.
Yeah.
So who wants to take this question with C++ versus Rust?
I'm pretty sure Rust was like just this strange little experiment at Mozilla when they started building Flutter.
Exactly.
So,
I was literally about to say the same thing. It was a twinkle in the eye of the developer at the time when Dart was coming around. So it's not specifically Flutter, but Dart, right? Why is Dart using C++?
No,
I'm just saying
C++ is a framework that they've used for the engine.
Yeah. No, but what I'm trying to say is like Dart is written with C++, right? And my point here is that, and not Rust. I mean, I honestly like Rust. I like the idea of Rust and the safety it brings and the other things that Rust brings to as a language. More fast than C++? Well, that depends on scenario. I won't go down that route, right? However, it's not necessarily about it's like the capabilities that we get with Dart, right? Like, so non-nullability. I'm just going to take a little sidetrack. Promise, Pascal, small sidetrack. Non-nullability. By us marking something as non-nullable, we know it doesn't need a null check inside the compiled code. So that's the reason why your code gets like 19% faster. I think it was the statistic, or more performant. Is because all these checks for null get removed. It's the same thing that happens in Rust, right? So Rust, because it compiled time, it knows a lot more information the language can describe than C++ can describe in its syntax. It can make the decisions that this is never going to be null. This is never going to dereference incorrectly. I don't have to put these exceptional conditions around my code, so it runs a lot quicker. You're doing less code. So it'd be nice if we did, but it's never going to happen. As far as I understand it, like the amount of code and the transition would be just it wouldn't be worth worth its value at that point.
Could it be
please
like
raise your hand?
Yeah, could it also affect?
Raise your hand if you are using the block pattern.
I have used it.
I have used it.
Yeah, I have used it.
Same for me.
But there is a but.
I'll say I used it in my version of the block pattern.
Exactly, right?
Exactly,
So I think everyone here has not. I don't think. I've spoken to a lot of people about this. I think a lot of people like the idea of block and the idea of streams and unidirectional data flows and all this, but they don't adhere to the exact block specification because it ends up being restrictive in terms of the way I do my code. That I wanted to do things slightly differently and I can't suddenly because I had to create 5 new blocks, so I have to do things a certain way. Or I have to use the event state model and this kind of stuff that doesn't suit my exact scenario that I'm trying to deal with. So I end up always still using the principles of blocking in terms of streams, but not necessarily the block pattern directly.
I think the answer can be like you could just directly go to that particular video which everyone knows, which is related to Angular, right? Like Angular Dart and block pattern, how it actually came. Yeah. So I think that pretty much covers actually what is the proper way of writing it. But then I think it depends on the use case. People have like, very different ways of doing it. But don't do something like, you are having stream builder inside stream builder and inside stream builder. That's really gonna be very bad.
I can tell you that it's perfectly nice to do that if you have initial data.
Maybe yes. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not trying.
Also, if you're using block, also use immutable data structures and sealed classes. This helps you a lot if you are having like an initial data and you're missing a big part of your data. And then while you're loading more data, you put in another state and you can show more. So next question is about a linear gradient tween. There's a pull request for that. Why is it not in the official SDK right now? Should it be added?
Yes.
I don't know.
There's potentially lots of things you could add.
I have to say, like tweens, that are one of those things where you want to tween for something. You only know that you need a tween for something until you go to use it as an animation, right?
Yeah.
So
but
you can animate
I'm
anything.
questioning why do you exactly like those simple workaround is, for example, if you have two colors and you're creating a normal gradient with like a linear gradient inside a container, whatever. You are still providing it two colors. So why can't we just have you animate between you have two animations. You animate the first and the second one between two colors, and the gradient will change accordingly. So you effectively have something close to that.
Yeah,
because you provide.
But I think the question here is, what do you think about it? Should it be added officially? And the answer is, I think it's a great idea to have more tweens across the framework. It should be yes, it should be added officially. Like if the tween is for a class that's built to the framework, yes. I mean, like it then becomes de facto standard. That's great. Great, there's a PR for it, but it takes time to review these PRs and get them merged, get them in there, get them like the main thing that stops PRs for
there has to be documentation
and tests, right?
Yeah.
So
I've been trying to push a PR to Matrix 4 for like months now, and they made me do 3 changes, and then they're like, no, we'll go back with the first version, but you add a deprecate tag and everything over there. So I'm just gonna wait a week and then I'm gonna start again.
Also, I think it will be prioritized very less as compared to other things which they have.
It's not. You can easily work around this thing. And there's, for example, the share plugin PR you saw that was from 2018.
I honestly wonder. The thing is, I honestly wonder if there's a path. I mean, I have mentioned this in some previous things, but I wonder if there's a path the Flutter team could take where they have a set of developers or some team members that are just essentially being developers in test, in terms of they are going in, they're looking at these PRs, they're doing the work to get that PR into the framework, right? Like there's so many bits of code, so many improvements, so many all these things that can be done. Devin, you're probably like they've asked you to make those changes. I mean, really, it's kind of like they've made decisions and other changes with the other PRs that have affected your one. I feel like if you have to go in there and change it, it would have been quicker and easier for them to make that change and pull it into the repo, and then it would have been solved, rather than having to wait for your feedback and go back and forth and deal with all these other issues in between. I kind of feel like there's a kind of a role there which solves that issue where these issue tickets are going back and forth and bouncing around, and they get solved, but very slowly instead of getting solved very quickly. Sorry, on topic.
and even like it depends on the person who's actually reviewing all of those. Oh yeah, sorry, go on.
True. Let's get with some questions.
Yeah.
Is there any plugin or package that can be used to live streaming from server URL like YouTube and Facebook and so on in Flutter?
So you can use Chumi, which is a video player, and you can just put in an URL. The problem you will get here is
live streaming,
how to get the URLs. Live streaming, it still works.
The video player, normal video player plugin will play HLS live streams. So if you just plug up your HLS stream to somewhere online and then just put the URL to that, I don't know if it works for a local file. I haven't tried, but you could try like a local HLS asset file that points to your streaming assets. Bit weird, but you could do that. But normally, HLS stream online, and then any streaming service, just plug the URL back down to your video player, and you can play in your app. Obviously, if you just want to if you want to use YouTube, you could just use YouTube. Like you can just either use the native widget and wrap it, or on web you can use an iframe like we do on the Hack 20 website.
I mean,
Going to the last community questions now.
Is there a way to create a virtual view on Flutter using gyroscope? Virtual view, I think.
What's a virtual view exactly?
Are they talking about AR kind of thing, like an AR view?
Yes, you can.
But a gyroscope's not really enough. I've done a little bit actually around this stuff, and actually what you need is the whole 9 degrees of freedom. So you also need the magnetometer to tell you like a compass to tell you the direction as well as the accelerometer.
There's a package called Arium Sensors. If you go to, I'll put the link in the chat in a minute. I made a 2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago. I made a package. I made an app called Smooth Rotation, and what it allows you to do is rotate your device, and your UI, your Flutter UI, will rotate and always remain upright according to true north. So it's kind of like you can move your phone around, and you'll always see your UI correctly laid out. This is a fun little example, but that package uses all of the right sensor package and all those things. So you can go digging out and find information. Talking about virtual view, if you're talking about something like AR or VR, so that you can move your phone around and see into a virtual space, that is all possible still. So there are AR and AR Core, and there's AR Kits for. I think there's actually one package now that supports both.
Yes.
So you can take advantage.
No, but that one I think just takes both of the Android and iOS packages and then just creates a common API for them. So they depend on each one.
The point here is that with Flutter, you can create those virtual views and then have that kind of capability. There is nothing necessarily stopping. So the thing, I think, I just want to point out, is there any way? There's always a way with Flutter. I think that's the key point. Like, because Flutter isn't restricting you in any way. Anything you can do on Android, you can continue to do with Flutter. Anything you can do on iOS, you can continue to do with Flutter. The question is how difficult it is and how much time it's going to take you. So the packages help, but you can still do it all yourself if you wanted to. And the key point here is to say, like, if you wanted to, you can calculate, you can take those sensor information, you take the magnetometer, the gyro, and all this, work out where your device is in reality, and work out where your virtual point is, and display that on the screen, so you can actually do all that kind of stuff yourself. Still, there's no limitations there.
Exactly.
And if your question is about the if your question is about the sensor, the raw sensor data itself, a lot of times the packages do not exist. For example, you could get location, but you cannot get raw GNSS data from a Flutter package like that. So that you would have to pull out from the native framework yourself. You cannot just, like, a lot of packages do not supply you native data, rather they give you the final location. Yeah. In some cases, iOS simply does not give you local data. I think after Nougat, for example, the raw GNSS, after Nougat, they exposed it on Android, but on iOS, the iOS provider just gives you direct location. It doesn't worry about what the raw data is. So you might have some trouble getting it out in some cases.
Always be ready to get some troubles in iOS. So yeah, that's how iOS works.
Thank you, all of you, for answering these questions. I have one final one, and I think this is what many people are interested in, and it is how to become a GDE. And since Maxime recently became one, I want him to ask him, what was your journey? How did you become one?
Oh, okay. Thanks for that. Yeah, I guess it's just all about being part of the community. In fact, like I guess this has been, I've read and heard people say this before, is that it's really shouldn't be the end goal that you want to become a GDE. It's more, I think, recognizing what you're already doing. So I think from the point of view of becoming a GDE, you sort of become a GDE when you're doing what a GDE does. I know it sounds like a bit recursive, but so yeah, so for me, it was just kind of like, I guess, becoming recognized for the work that I was already doing in the community. So for the last few years, I've been like a co-organizer of our local GDG here, which I got into by through being like an Android developer for a while. And so yeah, I was participating in the GDG through being an Android developer. Then that's how I sort of actually ran into Flutter and became interested in Flutter. And along the way, we started running like Flutter events for the communities. We did local study jams and kind of like mini meetups, and that sort of grew into us forming a local Flutter meetup group. And we were just like, yeah, running meetups for the Flutter community, running more events. And out of that is essentially how I became a GD. I started writing also. I don't do so much video as some of the other guys do. Like, I watch your videos; they're fantastic, both of you. But like, I was writing tutorials and articles around Dart and Flutter, and so it was just sort of, I guess, my engagement in the community that led me to become a GDE just through the work that I was doing. Hopefully that answers the question.
I think this is the essence. That's what I always say. Behave like a GDE and you will become one at one day.
Yeah, I think that's a very good thing, is that if you're doing the things that a GDE does, then you're pretty much most of the way there to being a GDE, as it were. So, and yeah, for me, it's all about participating in the community. Like the reason I got into this was not to become a GD, it was because I wanted to basically be a member of this really cool community that was springing up all over the place. And like for me, Flutter was this huge new thing. Like I basically had been doing Android for almost a decade, and like finding out about Flutter and starting to do Flutter kind of basically reminded me of the excitement I had all that time back when I first discovered Android. It was literally, that's what convinced me that this is something I want to do, is because like I had that kind of flash of like, oh wow, this is the kind of thing that blew me away when I first got what Android was all about. Because I remember like when Android first came out, I was, well, this is weird stuff. Like, why is Google reinventing the wheel and coming up with this whole new mobile Java thing when we already have it? And it took like about 6 months for it to finally click, and went, oh wow, the whole operating system's done like this. This is cool. And I had the same thing with Flutter, but I'll be perfectly honest, like for the first probably year that I'd heard about Flutter, I thought like, this is just some crazy thing. Why do we need it? We've got so many other cross-platform frameworks. This isn't like anything big. And then finally, like one day it just went click, and I went, oh my God, no, this is like a better way to do development. And for me as an Android developer, it was a better way to do Android development. And that was it. That got me hooked into Flutter, and then in the community, and the rest is history.
I'm kind of curious what other people's experience are, because I had a very similar one. I heard about Flutter as an Android developer. I've been doing Android for like the better part of decade, 7 years or something. I don't know, whatever it's been. And I heard about Flutter, and I thought, oh, another cross mobile platform thing. It's going to be terrible. I'm going to hate it. I had a like PhoneGap and all these other things around. And I was at a Google event, and they did a presentation on it and explained how it differs under the hood from all these other ones and what it's doing. And I was like, wait a second, this is clicking. This is interesting. I think this is exactly what I've been looking for. This solves all these problems I was having with compatibility and rendering of UI, and I could do all my animations the way I wanted to do them. I should give this a go. Jumped straight on it that evening. I downloaded, installed the Flutter SDK, and I just literally within half an hour, I'm like, hot reload. Wow, this is so quick. I'm just making this happen. And there's obviously this hurdle, like trying to understand layout, trying to understand all these things that are different, right? And declarative UI, and just the way you approach things differently. But once you got past that, over that, like anything, like I tell people, when you get a new operating system, like, or a new version of an OS, you're like, why did they move that button? And why did they change this little thing? Or why couldn't it just be the same as it was before? That's always the thoughts that we have, because we're used to how it was. But as soon as you get over that hurdle, as soon as you get over the little hurdle of like, now I appreciate the way the changes that were made, like that's the kind of thing that you get with Flutter. So it's like, as soon as you get over that initial hump of understanding the way things are done, you're like, wow, this is so much better. This is so much easier. I'm so happy I did this, right? So I think that the thing about any language, I think, or any new framework, is that's always the problem with adoption. But Flutter makes it so nice that it's not that much of a leap to make it over that hurdle.
Yeah. And
thank you, everyone. Yeah, it was an amazing discussion here. I really appreciated all your feedback and all the answers to the questions. I'm closing here now. It's getting very late, especially for Maxime. And thank you, everyone here, for attending. Thank you, Maxime. Thank you, Pavan. Thank you, Devon. And we will have another stream in like 4 to 5 hours with a huge panel with Flutter at scale, and how big companies are using Flutter, and not only startups. Flutter is for everyone, and it's so amazing. Even the big companies are joining in. So thanks again, and yeah, see you in the next stream.
See you.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
All right. Thanks very much.